You are listening to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida.
Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast. I'm Tom Argersinger, your host, and this is Kelly Allen, my co-host. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Tom. On the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, we explore how we as Jesus followers can connect the dots between education, contemporary culture, and biblical theology, and live like Jesus in this broken and challenging world.
Amen.
And today we get to talk about Season 2.
Woo! Season 2!
Yay!
Excellent.
I can't believe we're already on Season 2.
I know, I can't either.
Yes.
How many did we have last year, by the way? It was like 19
I think it was like
or something?
18.
18, 19?
Yeah.
So Season 2, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think some folks actually listen here or there.
They do. And so we want to welcome the people from different countries that are listening.
Yeah, very good.
We have over 10 countries represented that are listening to the podcast, including the United States, of course, but Canada, Iraq, Taiwan, Germany, Greece, Poland,
crazy.
Iceland, Russian Federation, India.
That's crazy.
I can't believe it.
You know, and my hope and prayer has always been, our hope and prayer has always been that it actually does kind of help folks, you know, and help them to think through some of these things and at least to some degree, by God's grace and for His glory, it's at least happening in some way. So
yes,
that's cool.
And we've gotten some interesting feedback from different countries.
Yeah, good. That's great.
So really awesome. And so, today we're going to talk about what we're doing in Season 2.
Yeah, big deal. Some changes for Season 2, right? So some changes. So some format changes. And
we're really focusing on like support for kids and parents, and we have different ways that we're going to be doing that this season.
And so kind of last season we really focused on just basically we would have guests and you and I would occasionally do one together and we would deal with topics. But this year we're kind of expanding that format a little bit, and so we're actually doing connecting the actual topic, sort of topic of the month, if you will. And then we're building some podcasts around that topic using external experts and people who are really well versed in this in their fields. And then also people from CCS, which kind of will talk more about the application of like, how do we do this? In education, how do we flesh this out? Because we always want to keep that inflection point there. And then also hopefully be able to get some parents in as well. And maybe even some students here or there, younger people, to kind of reflect on how does it work in the real world? And I think that input is really helpful. So we've got the podcast series each month around a topic, and we'll talk about those topics in a second. And then we want to connect that actually to book recommendations. So that we can say, well, for the month of, let's say, October, and when we talk about the theme, that's going to connect back to a particular book. Not a book club or something like that, but just a reference, a resource. We'll draw some...
It's a tangible resource that, we can use to follow along and help us in our life.
Absolutely, right? Because I mean, what we know that our listeners really want is they want us to focus on. It's good to have some of the theory, the theology, the philosophy, which is good, but we also need to be really tangible at the end of the day. What are the takeaways? How can this be applied to what we actually how we live, and how can we live a little bit more like Jesus, like you say at the beginning, and in a broken and challenging world. So you've got the podcast series, you've got the book connection there, and then also really excited about this part. We got this third piece, which is a live event. And we're going to talk about how some of our listeners who live farther away might access that in a minute. But so a live event, and we'll try to do that. We're planning on doing that on a monthly basis. And the event will kind of be tuned to whatever the theme is of that month. So I feel like I need to get into the themes, okay? So themes are good. So the first theme in the month of September, which we're going to probably focus into a single podcast.
And that's when we're recording it, not necessarily when they will be listening.
Correct.
To
Very
it.
good. Right. So whenever we
feel free to join in on any time.
Right. And by the way, you were telling me that we've actually had a lot of people during our hiatus. So tell me about how did that work?
So we took the summer off, the school summer off, and
at least August. We did a little bit in the beginning of summer, I think. But. A little
Yeah,
bit. Yep,
and so and so while we haven't been recording, we've had over 100. I think, did I say 150?
120
downloads.
Something like that. Yeah.
Just catching up, and so
Which is neat.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to. It's always going to live where we put it, and
Right.
so you guys just feel free to come in, anytime.
Yeah, so listeners can really access whenever they can get to it, because we don't feel people feel pressure. It's like so they're going to have some time. So there'll be some other hiatuses that will allow for that as well.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So that first one. What's going to be filmed in September will be really around the fundamentals and kind of reviewing and continuing to keep fresh the idea that word worship and prayer is the foundation for understanding biblical worldview, and biblical worldview is the foundation for understanding what it means to be gospel-centered, and therefore to deal with these different subjects. Because some of the subjects are, in fact, most of them are not simple. And so we've got to have a foundation that's really, really strong, and we can rely on and have standards we can refer to. So as we have all these robust discussions, we don't lose our center. So that's really, really important. So that's going to be our September focus. We're actually going to be having here locally, we're going to have at our new King's Crossing space for CCS, we are going to have what we call a prayer furnace, which is essentially a big prayer meeting. But it's not so much in a traditional sense. It's a little more contemporary version of that, but basically creates space for God to meet with people. Essentially.
And so we'll tell our listeners when that's happening.
Absolutely,
and they can join us.
And actually, I'm pretty sure this is true. So you can quote me on this, I think, but I think we're looking at October 1st.
Okay.
So technically, the event is just in the beginning of October.
Okay.
So October 1st.
So beginning of October, they should look out for that.
Absolutely, absolutely right. So that's and the book for that, we're kind of connecting to that, and we'll probably reference this particular book kind of throughout the year. It's called the book's called Parent Differently by Kathy Koch, Koch, PhD, strong believer, very articulate, is really a psychologist, really good at simplifying complex things so that people can apply it to their life really well. She's pretty well known in Christian circles, at least. Very effective speaker, etc. But anyway,
and I have to say, I will be going through these books with the listeners.
Yeah,
you know, I haven't been exposed to these books as well, so I'm very excited.
Awesome, very good. Yeah. So so that's the 3-part of the September deal. The filming in September. And then in October, we're going to move to. We touched on this last year, but it just bears so much more unpacking, I think, which is the idea of technology, social media, phone usage, all this kind of stuff, and how that relates to kids and parents, and then what God might have to say about this. So that's our listeners and other people we just talked to continue to bring this up, as this is a challenge.
It's such a hot topic.
Yes. Because it's hard. It's really complicated.
It really is.
So for us, our filming in October will be around kind of developing a kind of a practical biblical guide, perhaps you could use the word, to be able to say, how can we help parents understand how to do this better? How can we do it better as a school, etc. And then the book we're going to use for that, as far as we know right now, I think, and I'm sure we'll use this. We may use a couple other ones, but Screens and Teens. Also by Kathy Koch, Screens and Teens. Well, I think we have a link on Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram, there's a link to all of these books.
Okay, and then maybe we could put it in the notes for the podcast at some point too. That'd be great. Okay, so we'll do that, and we're also our local event for that series on technology with kids. By the way, it's not just teenagers. The book is Screens and Teens, but it applies also to younger kids as well. But we're also going to have a local kind of a seminar from somebody who actually works in the law enforcement field and kind of specializes in helping parents get around this topic.
I imagine we'd have a lot of parents interested in
I would
that
think
and
so,
going to that event for sure.
Yeah, and we're figuring out the best way to actually communicate that event, again, back to our overseas listeners and things. How can they access those live events? Well, it's either going to be recorded and broadcast later or live streamed, depending on the event.
So they'll be able to follow our social media, I would say. You know, absolutely. To get the latest updates. Very good. And that moves us into November, our filming in November anyway.
And that's going to be around another huge topic, which we also touched on for a few episodes last year, but I don't think we even began to plumb the depths of it, and that is the whole issue of anxiety in kids and parents. It's not just kids who are challenged, but adults who are challenged. And we're going to focus on kids because that's our swim lane, but that doesn't mean we don't include the adult parental side, because they're obviously intimately connected with their kids.
Yeah.
And therefore with schooling in general, et cetera. So building emotional skills and resilience, I think, is going to be the kind of the subtopic for our November series. We're actually going to be using a great book. Now, just as a disclaimer, I have not read all of this book yet. And by the way, I should probably say, with all the books we recommend, CCS we do not necessarily agree with every single thing that is said in the books or that the author has ever written or spoken about.
Yeah.
So just as a disclaimer, we'll say that a few times.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, we're recommending resources that we think are great. This book, I haven't read all of it personally, but we're going to use it. We're going to tentatively recommend it, and we'll vet that a little bit more. But The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, or Haidt, H-A-I-G-H-T. Awesome book, just about why this generation has experienced what they're experiencing. But even better than that, second half of the book is, what do we do? What are specific things as parents that are straightforward? And then how do we kind of build a culture of people who believe sort of the same thing? Because that's the hard part. If you're a parent trying to say, well, I want to do this with we talked about it, I think, last season. I want to do this, but if I'm the only one and my kid's the only one, that's weird, right? As a parent. Yeah. You have to kind of wrestle. But if you know that there are other people who believe the same thing, there's a critical mass. That's true. It's a little easier. Yeah. So anxiety kids, parents, and then we're going to, for the plan right now for the local event on that topic is to do essentially a panel discussion, a live panel discussion over at King's Crossing here, again, filmed in some fashion so people can access it later.
It may even be the podcast.
Might even be we actually did talk about that. Yeah. So it might actually be a live podcast. That's kind of fun. Yeah. We have it, by the way, our producer is sitting over here going, Vance is going, we have no idea how we're going to do this. Yeah. It doesn't, he's brilliant.
We're just throwing out ideas.
Right, we're just throwing ideas. And somehow he's going to make this happen. I don't even know how. But anyway, but that would really it would be fun. Hopefully it will work out, and it would be fun to do a live podcast. Yeah. The idea there is to bring in some professionals in the field, whether they be psychologists or perhaps looking back, perhaps getting your friend Nari back. We're thinking about
Dr.
that
Jeter.
anyway.
Yep.
Yep. And so we'll look at that. And then maybe an LCSW as well to say, let's look at this from different angles, and how can we help people wrap their arms around this, because it's a big topic.
Yeah, these are such great topics. I'm so excited.
I hope so, And by the way, we should say that I want to take this opportunity. We really would like our listeners and viewers, send us questions and topics. We're going to talk in a minute about the spring of this year, the filming season, the second part of the season 2. And some of that's going to be generated by some of the comments. So we'd love for people to continue to ask questions, stuff that they would like us to talk about. Yeah,
message us on our social media platforms. And
Yeah. So feel free to do comments and questions and the social media platforms, as Kelly said, so we can respond to those. I think that's going to be that'd be great. Really important. So in December, the filming for December, really, we're going to try to focus around gospel-centered creativity. And really how the creative arts speak into the culture, really. We touched on this with Hillary with the Latour discussion late in season 1, but we want to really unpack that more. So the book we're going to use for that is a book called Refractions by Makato Fujimura, who is an amazing visual artist, who is a Christian, strong believer, word-centered Christian. And he's such an articulate voice on this. Makoto Fujimura. The book's called Refractions.
Let me know if I'm wrong about this, but I was reading a little bit about him, and did he have a gallery that was in one of the Twin Towers?
That's a good question. I know that he was in New York near the Twin Towers when it happened in 2001. Yeah. And I know that was a huge trauma in his life, and a lot of his art coming out of that was in reference to and processing that. It could have been a gallery. Oh yeah, he's a strong believer.
Yes.
Word-centered Christian, yeah, for sure.
And I think maybe some of the art in this book has to do with.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
It does. He's done a lot of projects, and we'll talk about that. He's done a lot of projects. He has this one really cool project called the Four Holy Gospels, which is this kind of large-sized book, and he basically interacts with the book with painting. And he does a little bit more on the abstract, non-representational kind of art, but it's just beautiful. He illuminates the letters like they used to do back in the day with Scripture. But then also, it's almost like as he was reading the text, he painted into the text. And so the text is overlaid onto the painting. And it's just, it's describing it doesn't do it justice.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's he's just an amazing guy. And I think people will enjoy getting to know him a little bit.
Yeah, and let me say, people who know us know we're kind of creative people, but even if you don't feel like you're a creative person, everybody's creative in their own way.
100%, right.
And they can embrace this.
Yeah, and he actually talks about that a lot. You know, creativity is actually, and I think one of Latour's last theme, I think, was on their album that dropped, that Hillary talked about, whenever that was, in August or whenever it was. That their theme was co-create.
Yes.
And so to your point, everyone living has the opportunity to essentially create after God or co-create with God.
Yes.
And because he is the great creator, capital C. So yeah, it's for everybody.
So it's for everybody.
Great point. The other thing is, and so really excited about this local event. The local event is actually going to be a gallery opening.
Yeah.
At King's Crossing, because an art gallery, because part of the plan with King's Crossing from the beginning, it's, by the way, for folks who don't know, it's a 3,800 square foot space that houses senior classrooms for seniors, but also is sort of a smaller event space, and we're holding a lot of events, starting to hold events over there. And I think actually, if we can work out the details, this podcast will be filmed over at King's Crossing, hopefully starting at later this month, I guess.
Yeah, so it should be said our listeners may see some different backgrounds.
Different backgrounds, right? Absolutely.
If you're watching us, yes.
That's right, exactly. So the gallery opening is a pretty big deal. We're going to have some musical guests as well, and then basically a lot of student art will be over there, but we're also going to incorporate some art that's not just our students as well. And we'll be working with Melinda Gernhardt, who is our local artist in residence in a sense. She teaches art here as well. And she's been instrumental in the aesthetic that we've developed over at King's Crossing, kind of that modern, semi-industrial, quasi-industrial look that we're trying to go for. And it's really a cool space for collaboration and for events and things like recording podcasts. Yeah. So it should be pretty fun.
Yes, I'm excited.
So that's kind of season one. And season two, the first half of season 2 in a nutshell.
Yes, first half.
First half.
Yes.
Second half, we're gonna dive into some even deeper water.
Yeah.
We touched on this last year, but those of us working with the podcast, and me particularly, really feel drawn to dive deeper into the topic of personhood. Because it's not one that, like anxiety and things like technology, are right there on everybody's tip of their brain. But personhood, the issue of what is a person, who decides, all that is actually super foundational to things like identity, purpose, meaning, and all that goes with that. And then it's also fundamental to racial questions, to questions around gender.
Okay, so we're really going deep.
We're going deep. Well, yeah, and it's like I try to get out of it. I'm like, do we really want to do this? But I think the reality is, especially in education, we in this field, in this sector, you can't get around these questions because so much of what you do as a teacher is based on assumptions about this.
True.
And basically the curriculum we use, which reminds me.
Yes, one of our viewer feedback was that they wanted to know how CCS picks the curriculum. Yeah.
And right, and which is really good question, actually. Good example why we love viewer and listener questions. Yeah. Because it's a great one. Because the reality is that it's not easy. It is not easy to choose curriculum any more than it's easy to choose books to read.
Right.
Big topic nowadays,
yeah,
right?
it really is.
Yeah, okay. So, wow.
Will we be getting into that?
Oh, well, maybe. It depends on how long I want to work here at CCS and how long we want the podcast to continue. No, I mean, I think it's important for us as a school to be honest about some of the challenges around some of those things. But at the same time, to always remember that the core, the center of what we're doing, like we said about the initial work we're going to do this spring or this fall with the podcast and other events and books and stuff, is word, worship, and prayer. All the other questions that are very important culturally that we're talking about and that a lot of people have talked so brilliantly about, we're just going to try to touch the hem of the garment, really, and then relate that back to what we're doing in education. We got to remember what we say at the end of every podcast pretty much is, if you forget everything else, Jesus is Lord. And that fact that Jesus is Lord over every single area of life, we can't forget that. And so that's why we can kind of talk about some of these things and be relatively unafraid, because ultimately we're going to we don't have all the answers. And I want to make that clear. I don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but God has spoken in ways through His Word and applied through His Spirit that allow us to have a conversation, and He can reveal more truth as we go through that, so that we can live differently as kingdom citizens. So anyway, that's what we want to do. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot when you sit and talk about it all at once.
I know. I'm really excited. I'm excited for the challenge. That this will bring, and and all the different ways that listeners can become involved.
I think that's really important. And by the way, I would say this too, as we develop more a resource list, because that's I think maybe important to build off of what you said, Kelly, is that as we are going to connect these individual books to particular topics filmed in a particular space and time, but that what we'll do with those books later is just basically build them into an ongoing resource list. So if somebody's listening, wants to listen to the thing about anxiety and everything, and kids and parents in June of 25, the book will appear, but it'll just be on a list of resources, and they can access it probably by topic, I guess. So, and
I think it needs to be said too, if you're someone who's struggling just to even listen, stay where you're at. Just listen. You don't have to be any more involved than that.
No. Right. For those people that maybe a little bit of overachievers.
And you want more to dive in more. We have options.
It should be fun and enjoyable and everything. So I think that's a great word. And also I think we don't say this very often, but we'd love to have folks, tell your friends. Because ultimately, as we've kind of prayed through, even continuing this season, I was trying to go back during the summer during our hiatus and say, well, God, do you really want us to even keep going in this? And it seems like He does from everything we can tell. But I think we just want to continue to have that posture. And I think we would love to have people praying with us about that, those kind of things. In other words, what are the topics? What are the questions that we can help with in our swim lane? Essentially, we're not experts in psychology. We're not experts in really, bona fide experts in theology, but we are educators. We are parents. And we hopefully can help, like you say, help people connect the dots, because that's where a lot of people seem to struggle. So that's what we're trying to do. It's good. Anything else before we close today?
I don't think so. I'm just so, I keep saying this, but I'm just so excited about
I am really too. I am really excited about it.
I know I personally am going to learn a lot.
Well, likewise. Likewise. So once again, we want to thank you guys for tuning in to this little trailer, essentially, for season 2. We're grateful for you guys as listeners and viewers. And as we always say, if you forget everything else we say, please, please, please remember that Jesus is Lord. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Gospel Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida. You can find us online at myccs.org.